Welcome to Creating a Family. Talk about adoption and infertility. Today we're going to be talking with a panel of young adult adoptees, those in their 20s, about the experience of transracial adoption. They were 4 black kids, or not kids, actually young adults, being raised by white families, telling us what the experience is like from the inside out. I think you will really enjoy this show. I'm Dawn Davenport. I'm the director of Creating a Family. We are the National Adoption and Infertility Education and Support nonprofit. You can find us online at creatingafamily.org. One of the things we do here at Creating a Family is educate. And we have an Adopt Ed for Parents Education Center. We have over 100 one-hour audio courses where we interview experts, and we have these are courses that you can utilize as your pre-adoption training or at any point in your adoption journey to become a better parent. We cover every topic you can imagine. As you have 100 courses you can imagine, we cover a lot of topics, including transracial adoption. We have quite a few courses on transracial adoption, talking about how to be a better parent, how to go about doing it, things you need to consider before you do it, and things such as that. We have a lot of courses. I think you'll really enjoy it. To find our Adopt Ed for Parents Online Education Center, you can go to our website, creatingafamily.org. Click on the word online education at the top, and it will take you right to that center. There's a sorting mechanism, so if you're interested in any particular topic, sort for it, and the courses that are specific to that will be the only ones that are listed. This radio show is underwritten by our corporate sponsor, Ferring Pharmaceutical. For women who are undergoing fertility treatment and are still struggling to conceive, many daily scenarios and interactions can take a toll on their emotional health. There is a new app out called Ferticom. It's newly released. It's both for Apple and Android devices, and it was developed by a friend of this show, Dr. Ali Domar. She is a reproductive psychologist, as well as Dr. Elizabeth Grill. And it was designed specifically to help women address the many challenging emotional life situations that arise when struggling to conceive. You can get more information at their website, ferticomapp.com. Let me spell that for you, ferticalmapp.com. This show, as well as all the resources provided by Creating a Family, could not happen without the generous support of our gold sponsors, who believe in our mission of providing unbiased education and support to those struggling to create a family. A few of our gold sponsors include Children's Connection. They are an adoption agency providing services for domestic infant adoption and embryo donation adoption throughout the United States. They also provide home studies and post-adoption support to families in Texas. And Holt International. They were founded in 1956 with the mission for every child to have a loving and secure home. They have programs that strengthen and preserve families that are at risk of separation, and they lead the global community in finding families for children who need them. And they also provide the pre- and post-adoption support that they need to thrive, a very important thing, especially for those of us here at Creating a Family. In addition to those great gold sponsors, we also have other sponsors whose generosity allows us to bring you this show. We ask that when choosing an adoption service provider, please consider choosing one from the Creating a Family directories, which you can find by going to our website, hovering over the word adoption, and click on service provider. Our professionals, it may have it listed under professionals. You can search by location, type of adoption, your number of years in operation, just a host of factors that we think are important when choosing. And by using these directories, you support those who support us, and we thank you. Today we're going to be talking with a panel of 4 adoptees in their 20s who were raised in a transracial adoption. All 4 of these young people are black, and all 4 of them were raised by white families. As I said at the beginning, the real experts on adoption are those who are living the experience, the adoptees. And one of the things that we strive to do here at Creating a Family is bring the voices of adoptees out for adoptive parents to hear, so that we will do a better job in raising this next generation of adoptive people. This has been one of my very favorite shows. We did it several years ago, almost 3 years ago, and I have loved it. I learned something, which I often do at these shows, but I certainly learned something on this show. I found their forthrightness, their honesty, and their humor, really both charming and educational. I'm so pleased to bring it to you again. I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. Welcome, Mariette, Julius, and Andrew to Creating a Family.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, one of the first questions we got was from Holly. She said, when did you realize that your family was composed of different races? I have had many opportunities to quiz the academic experts, but rarely get to hear from adults who evolved, as my daughter will over time. Thank you for being a panelist. And I echo her thanks for you guys being on the show. I truly do. So her question is, when did you first realize that you were a different race from your parents? Mariette, you were older, so your experience may be different.
Yes, I was 3 years old when I was adopted, so it was pretty obvious to me that I was a different race, a different skin color than my parents. So, it wasn't ever an issue of my parents ever telling me I was adopted. I was aware from day one that I was being adopted into a family that looked very different from me.
Okay. Andrew, you were adopted as an infant, a very young infant. And infants don't immediately, obviously, know. At what age do you remember noticing that you were a different race or your parents were a different race?
I mean, to be completely honest, I always kind of, you always know, you always see it, but it was never an issue until kind of, elementary school or middle school, when other kids, see your mother, pick you up from school. That's the first time when it really hits, unless they have already known you or anything else. They point out, oh, that's your mother, and just that little question is usually, and was the first time that I thought about it.
So it's that's your mother, yeah. Go ahead, Julius.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say it's kind of the same thing for me. I was adopted when I was really little. It was pretty obvious to me, though, because my parents, they always, kind of kept an open discussion about it. We celebrate me and my brother's adoption day each year. They have always told us we were adopted, and, kind of like Andrew said, when you get a little bit older, when your mom comes to pick you up from school, when, you're out in public and people kind of, they just kind of double take a little bit when they see you and your parents, kind of, oh, who is that? Or, is that a family friend, or is that, maybe your aunt or something? And then, at that point you kind of know that, oh, to other people we're not, kind of what your normal family looks like, because we're different races, basically.
Did that bother you? Were you embarrassed by that? Was that a problem for you growing up? And I'd like to hear all of your parents, because you both, well, Andrew and Julius, you both mentioned it, and I think that the reality is transracial families do draw attention, and I think that a lot of us parents wonder if that bothers our kids. So, Julius, since you were the one who just mentioned it, did that bother you when people did, as you said, the double take or the who's that type of look or in question?
Yes and no. I mean, as a little kid, your kind of thing is fitting in with everyone else. You don't want to be the outlier. So on that level, it bothered me a little bit in the fact that, I had to do this explaining of, oh, I was adopted, these are my parents, kind of just little stuff like that. But, I mean, overall, it didn't bother me that much, and especially now it doesn't bother me at all, obviously. I grew up in a very, diverse area, very accepting area. So for the most part, it wasn't someone, saying it in kind of a negative way or anything like that. They were just, most of the people were just kind of curious about it because, when someone comes to pick you up, they're not expecting, a white woman to show up to pick up a little black child. They just kind of are curious about it, basically. So, it didn't bother me just on kind of the, when you're little, you kind of don't want to stick out. But other than that, it was not really a big deal.
Andrew, what about you?
I definitely have to, echo a lot of what he said. It's not that it bothered. It's more of just kind of a cumbersome task that you always have to kind of go into the, no, I was adopted, blah, 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 and go through that whole spiel and basically that whole panel with every single person who would meet your mom. It didn't ever really bother me. And obviously I was more than happy to, discuss it with people, because a lot of times it's more their curiosity. Every once in a while you'll get the mean look. I don't know if Julius, ever saw it, but walking around, more when you're a teenager behind your mom, I was standing 5'11", 6 foot. My mom is 5'4", walking through a department store. That's a little bit more difficult than when you're young and kids just ask you about it.
Yeah, so you did. We're going to come back to the teen. I'm going to come back to the teen, what you just described. Let me hear Mariette's experience of whether it bothered her that her family stood out in public.
Well, my experience was a little bit different because I had 4 other siblings, so we were kind of a ragtag group altogether. But I definitely relate to what they were saying about that adoptees kind of have this burden on them that everywhere they go, they have to have an explanation of who they are. And, for other kids, when their parents can pick them up, like you were saying, it's like, okay, I'm going home with mom and dad. But when our parents would come pick us up, it was always like, who is this? What's going on? And so we always had to have an explanation, and it was always up to us to kind of tell the story of our adoption. And after a while, you get tired of it. After a while, you just want to be like everyone else and a blend in. You don't want to always have to explain yourself. So I think for me, that got frustrating, always having to explain myself.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that. I wanted to come back to something. I think it was Andrew. You were the one who was just talking about. As it's one thing to have a little brown child holding his mother's hand, his white mother's hand, but our society might perceive it differently if it was a 5'11" or a 6 foot tall black teen. Trailing his white mom, and as if he was a typical teen, maybe perhaps scowling at her. Was that ever a issue for Andrew? You said that you had incidences in your teen years where that was a problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I say a problem, I don't want anyone to think that there's this horrible stigma that we went through and had to deal with our entire life, but it was just one of those things where, like Julia said earlier, you get a lot of the double takes. You get a lot of the, is he with her, and how are they related? It's one of those things where it's embarrassing enough going shopping with your mom. I love her to death, but, she always made me try everything on. But,
gosh,
it just
so
adds...
unreasonable.
I know, it was. But it always just
yeah.
adds kind of one more degree to, a situation.
Were you ever embarrassed that your mother was a different race? I'm not asking about the looks, but did it ever embarrass you that your mom didn't look like you? Our parents are embarrassing generally. Just when you're a teen, your parents can just be embarrassing. I speak as the mother of teens now, I will add. But did it ever embarrass you that your mom didn't look like you? And Andrew, I was asking you that question.
Sure. I can never remember being embarrassed by my mother. I can remember, never, not once. I can remember times where, depending where we are, I got looks, but it wasn't necessarily, I got looks that bothered me, but it wasn't necessarily because I was a transracial adoption. They weren't, looking at me, oh my God, there's a transracial adoptee. Mm-hmm. It was more of, the place that we were wasn't becoming to people that looked like me, regardless of who my parents would have been. You understand? You kind of know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Give me an example of a place like that. I know exactly what you're saying. Or I think I do, but give me an example.
Just basically like in the. It's hard because I don't want to stereotype any particular place or any group of people or anything like that. But as a minority, there will always be times when you stick out in a place where maybe nobody's ever seen a minority before, or rarely. And when you're with your mother, I felt more bad for her, just because it felt bad and embarrassed for her that basically we were there, and she was getting the looks and the scowls as well, more or less because I was there as well. Does that make any sense, Julius?
Yeah,
I don't know if you've ever had anything like that.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with what you're saying. I was actually going to kind of tag into that, part of the issue is, to give an example, I guess, is just a little easier way to do it. So I remember one time I was in a department store with my mom, and so, the assumption is, obviously, like we're talking about, that I wasn't with her. So I had someone just come up to me, and, I was a teenager. I think I was 14 or 15, and like we were saying, I'm much taller than my mom, and we look nothing alike, obviously. So this woman came up to me, and she asked me if I worked there. And, that's, kind of what you're saying, they are assuming, not just because, I'm African-American, but, because we weren't associated, they assumed I worked there, and then, that got my mom upset, and that's, kind of where this becomes an issue. It's not really an issue for me. I'm fine with, explaining to people and, kind of getting the look, because to be honest, if I was from, a single-race family, I probably would, maybe give a double take as well. But it's, it's kind of sad for my mom to have to explain to someone, he's my son, or like when I would go to a school event and they check me in, and because one of my parents I have a different last name from, so they'd come in and give her name, give my name, and then, the next question is, oh, well, who is that to you? And, she'd give them a look, it's my son. And, so that was, kind of where the issues arose. I just kind of felt bad for my parents having raised two children, going through all the stuff that you go through raising children, having to explain to people that, this is our family, this is who we are,
Mm-hmm. Mariette, what did your parents do that, or did they, I suppose that should be the beginning question, did they do things that made it easier for you to be in a mixed-race adoptive family?
Obviously I'm the oldest of 5 adopted children, so I feel like having them and kind of growing up with them and being able to kind of relate our experiences really helped. But also my parents had other friends who adopted from Haiti, and so we would, play with them and they would introduce us to them. So that really helped, like finding families who, A, have adopted children or have black children or being friends with people who look like us. That really helped us growing up.
Okay. Andrew, what about you?
I think one of the things that probably helped me the most was just, my mom was always open with me about it. But I also think, I can't imagine being kind of the first one coming up in it. Because my brother is 4 years older than me and was adopted 4 years before me. So basically by the time in our hometown when I was there, everyone already kind of knew my family. They kind of already knew my brother. They kind of knew that my parents had adopted. And many of the kids in my class, their brothers and sisters were in my brother's class. So, I kind of at times would get off a little bit easier in that sense just because my brother had to go through it before I did. And just kind of making more of a community, knowledge and community awareness, not necessarily posting pictures of our family saying this is our family all over, town, but just from being in organized things from Little League and all of that and having people know kind of who our family was, it made it a little easier.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I often say, pretty soon your family becomes old news. Even if you live in a bigger city, you run kind of in the same circles, and you start seeing the same people. And it doesn't take long for people to go, oh, that's just the Johnson family, or that's just the, whatever family, the Williams family, or whatever. You become old news. Julius, anything specifically that you can think of that your parents did that made it easier for you to grow up in a mixed-race family?
They did a couple of things. First, like was said before, they were super open about it, which helps a lot. If I, ever had a problem or if I ever had a question about it, always willing to talk about it with me. Also, they have a group of friends, actually, that they pulled together when me and my brother were adopted, who were adopting transracially at the time as well. So we had a group of people that we called our adoption group, which was a bunch of transracial families who had adopted kids. Most of them had more than one adopted kid around our age. So, where I grew up was a very kind of, not very diverse, area, I guess, is how to put it. So for me, it was really helpful to see that, hidden within this place where, I don't really see too many African American people, there are families that, not only have adopted kids, but have transracial adopted kids that, are my age. I can relate to them. And, it was just nice to see that. So we saw them every so often, went on trips with them to kind of, put everyone's family, a little at ease and kind of comfort the kids a little bit, which was nice.
Okay, yeah. Anything else before we move off of that you felt like they did that made it easier for you?
Okay. Not really that I can think of.
That's fine. No, I just didn't want to. I was changed. Yeah. I wanted to pick up on something you said. So, Julius, you didn't grow up in a particularly diverse area. Mariette, what about you? Did you grow up in a diverse area, neighborhood
Not
where
really.
there was a lot of?
I grew up in Vancouver, Canada, a little town outside of that area, and my brothers and sisters, we went to a really small Christian school, and we were the only black students at the school. And then as other families started to adopt in our area, we were all at the same school. So the only black students at our school were all adopted from Haiti. But outside of that, no. Like most of my interactions with my friends, my teachers, anyone else outside of that were all white.
Okay. And Andrew, what about you?
I was fairly in a really multicultural place where I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Even though it might not sound like that, it's one of the larger cities there in PA, and there's tons of diversity there. Yeah. Oh,
okay. And do you think since you're the one that actually grew up in a more diverse area, do you think, Andrew, that did it make it easier for you growing up in a diverse area, or do you think it wouldn't have mattered either way?
I'm not, 100% sure. Because I wouldn't want to take anything away from anything else anyone else went through, and I haven't experienced kind of growing up in a non-diverse area, such as the other two in our talk here. I do feel that at times it would make it easier because there was a couple interracial families within already, but at the same time it also kind of has its own problems that comes with being in a diverse area with people of multiple different ethnicities, and kind of those same expectations still remain. I mean, even if I was with my black friends or Hispanic friends and they would see my mother, they wouldn't expect her to be white. If I was with my white friends, they still wouldn't expect my mother to be white. So even growing up in kind of a culturally different area, those same type of, I wouldn't say stereotypes, but those same types of assumptions on what your mother would look like still hold true no matter what the race is.
Yeah, I can see your point. That's true. You are listening to Creating a Family. Today we're talking with three transracially adopted young people, well, not young people, young adults. I didn't ask your ages. I think all of you guys are in your 20s. Creating a Family has the largest adoption and infertility communities on the social networks, and we would love to have you join us. There are 3 ways to connect with us on Facebook. We have, of course, a Facebook page. You can find that at facebook.com/creatingafamily. We also have a very large and very active support group. It is a closed support group, so you have to join it, but we will ask to join it, but we will let you in. The easiest way to find that is to type the words Creating a Family in the Facebook search box. Both the page and the group will pop up. You can like the page and join the group. You can also connect with me personally. I am Dawn.Davenport1 on Facebook. We have 30 Pinterest boards. We really love Pinterest around here, so we hang out on Pinterest, and on both Pinterest and Twitter and Google+, you can find us at Creating a Family. That's our tag over there. The other thing, okay, we have a question again, this is also from Holly. She wants to know if your families purposely included multiple races and cultures in your lives. And I think that, Julius, you have said your parents made an active decision to try to do that. Andrew, I think you grew up in a diverse area. Did your parents go out of their way intentionally to make certain that there were, in their friend group, that there were families of color, other adoptive families as well as non-adoptive families of color?
No, I don't think they kind of went out of their way. It more or less just became, because they were kind of a lot more laid back and kind of let things be how they are. I don't think they made an active choice to include certain cultures or anything else. It just kind of, would happen as it would happen.
And Mariette, how about your family? There was a group of people around you who were all adopting from Haiti, but did your parents go out of their way to incorporate other people of color into their friend group, into their social group, into their professional group, their doctors or dentists or whatever?
No, not really. I think my parents had their hands full with the five of us, so we kind of branched out, and we, like I said, we made friends, we interacted with other people, but I don't think they really, besides the group of adopted children who are being adopted from Haiti, outside of that, there wasn't necessarily a pointed effort to introduce us to other people, other diverse people.
Would that have been something you wish they had done, or do you care, it's not something you care one way or the other about?
I mean, I think any child growing up would benefit from interacting with people who look like them. But like I said, I think, I don't want to say that, I would have been a completely different person had I had more black friends. I don't know if that is entirely true. But I do think that any child benefits from having friends or people around them that look like them.
Okay. Julius, did you experience racism as a child or a teen, or do you experience it now as a young adult?
Yeah, I mean, it's not usually, it's not something I think that people do on purpose. It kind of goes back to people kind of being, what we were talking about before, about people being curious and just kind of not knowing what's going on. Like I said before, I live right now. I grew up in a relatively diverse town, but then I moved when I was about 8 years old to a town that's predominantly white. So as a result, the high school I went to was almost all white. So it was, in kind of little things, day-to-day stuff, a coach asking, because we had a program that had kids from Boston who are of color come to our school because it, was literally, there are no black kids in my school other than that, basically. So, they would ask me, can you make it to practice early, assuming that I was coming from Boston, kind of stuff like that. So, I don't think it was, I'm going to make a racist comment here, but, it was just little stuff like that just because, they weren't really used to having African Americans around or, assume that I would even live in the town that, where I was going to school in.
Andrew, what about you? What has been your experience both as a child and a teen and as an adult with racism?
I think that, when you're a person of color at some point in your life, you feel some type of racism, be it kind of an overt racist act or even just kind of the small day-to-day things that people don't realize. And I live in New York City right now, and obviously they have a lot of things that go on here. But, just throughout my life, there was small things, there were some that were larger, and I think that, as a whole, that's just something that kind of comes with the territory of being a minority in the world. And, I know that sounds kind of almost bad, but, without getting into any details, it does happen from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Did your parents prepare you to experience racism? Did they help you? Did they help you figure out how to cope with it? And Andrew, I'll start with you. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely something that we talked about and that they felt and they knew. My mom was actually from a really small coal mining town in Pennsylvania, so she actually was around it growing up to an extent. And that's something that, she prepared me for, and, her and my father would talk about, and it's something that does need to be talked about. And sometimes it can be, difficult, and, things that I might see as racist, others may not, just because they don't have it happen as often. Walking down the street in the middle of the night, coming across someone and having them move to the other side.
Exactly, yeah. I think it's hard for white people to know that. I think you're exactly right. I think parents can mean very well, but the reality is they live in the world in white skin, and so, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Mariette, did your parents do anything to help you or your siblings prepare for the racism you might face and help you figure out how best to cope with it?
I remember my first incident when I probably must have been in like second or third grade, and I was riding a school bus, and one of the older boys leaned over to me, and he was like, "Go back to your own country, you immigrant." And so I was so confused. I was like, "What is he talking about?" So I went home and I told my mom, and she was like, just ignore him. If anyone says anything to you, just ignore it. And so that kind of became the way that I dealt with it, which I don't know if it is the best way to deal with it. And so later on, when I did have other things happen, I wouldn't tell my parents, and I would just kind of ignore it and just kind of hope that it would go away. So that's kind of how I dealt with it growing up.
And Mariette, why wouldn't you tell your parents?
I didn't want to upset them, and then I didn't know what they could do. If I go home and tell my parents, okay, this person, I got in an argument with someone today and they call me the N-word, okay, what are my parents going to do about it, And so I just didn't see there was a point in telling them, and so I just didn't tell them, and I just ignored it, and I just hoped that it would go away.
And Andrew, when you experienced racism, did you talk about it with your parents, or did you also just deal with it on your own and choose not to tell them?
Similar stories as she does. I mean, when you're young, you don't really know what it is, so you go and tell your parents, and they deal with it however they see fit. And then as you get older, when you know what it is, you just kind of don't even bring it up anymore, because like she said, there's not really anything they could do. Why worry them? If it was absolutely blatant and physical harm could come to me, then sure, I would tell them. But other than that, no, I didn't really ever tell them.
And, one of the things that we hear a lot of parents, especially of African-American boys, and this is parents of color as well as white parents who have adopted African-American boys, they worry now about how to raise a black son and prepare him to be a proud black and a safe man in America. I mean, no doubt this has certainly been exacerbated by the Trayvon Martin shooting and the Michael Brown shooting. So the parents wonder, what can we do to prepare our sons to be safe, but also to be proud of who they are, but we also want them we want them to be safe. And this may be more than, you guys are not parents, so I'm asking you as, and I'll direct it to all of you, but I'll start with you guys. And again, I realize you aren't parents, so you may not have thought through how to raise any potential sons in facing this issue. But do you have anything to say that your parents did that you can think of, that they talked to you about in order to help you know how to navigate the world in your skin? Julius.
Yeah, I would just say, kind of like kind of how my parents prepared me was basically just making sure that they're aware that it's out there. My parents always briefed me kind of, that people are racist, they do exist, so you need to be aware of it and act accordingly. And what that meant in my case is, always be respectful, don't give someone a reason or an excuse to make a racist comment or to, do something like that. Just kind of, be your own person, be respectful, and, kind of go about your own business. And, in terms of coping with a racist event, in my perspective, someone being racist to me, doesn't, I know it sounds kind of weird, but it really doesn't bother me. And that's kind of why, like they were saying before, that, I wouldn't really tell my parents if I had a racist event happen to me, because personally I kind of just see it as, ignorance on their part. It has nothing to do with me. If you, are going to think that about me or talk about me like that, that's on you. I personally know, it's not true, so, why would I let that affect me? So that's kind of my attitude I've always taken, kind of the attitude my parents have given me, that just, there are racist people out there, so just know that. And when you when you encounter it, act accordingly. Don't escalate the situation, and I guess kind of let it roll off your back, and I just kind of move on from it.
All good advice, I would add. Andrew, anything that your parents talk to you about in Joyce's case, be respectful and don't escalate, and I would add, get the heck out of there. But anything else that did your parents share with you about how to keep yourself safe?
Just kind of, really similar to what he said, making sure that you do realize it's out there. And I think also that realize that you will be judged by your skin at some point, and that, you will have to be at times twice as good to get the same type of treatment. You won't get away with saying things or doing things if you're stopped by the police that others might, or you won't be able to act in a certain way without being judged in a certain way as others might. So it's just always, like Julia said, be it fair, be it not, having to be on your best behavior at all times, but even a step further.
Mm-hmm. Mariette.
Those are really interesting answers, and I totally agree. And I feel like I'm actually married, and I have 2 children. So my son is 18 months old, and so obviously he's too young to really understand anything. But I'll be saying the same thing to my son, that there is, unfortunately, a bit of a double standard for some people in our society, and he has to be aware of it. And I grew up with that same awareness. Like when I go to a restaurant and I don't like something, if I become loud and belligerent and angry, I'm the angry black woman, and I'm treated differently. If someone of another race, would become angry or whatever. So I'm completely aware that I can act a certain way, and there's certain things that I can and can't do in public, and I can't do anything about that, but that's just the way it is. And I think I need to teach my son, unfortunately right now, this is the way it is, that you need to, I think number one, teaching black men not to fear authority or to fear the cops, because like my husband was raised in South Florida, and he just has a perception. He's like, growing up, people were just afraid of the police. And I said, I never really experienced that growing up. Like, I was, middle class background, and like the police were like our friends. They were, it wasn't ever a thing that they were out to get us. And so I think that's another thing we have to change, is that they're not out to get you per se. And so I think that changes your interaction when you feel like this person is on your side and not necessarily someone who's out to get you. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And I hadn't thought about it particularly as being something that parents, but you're right, that is something that parents can give. The attitude is that, but I think that you also have to take it one step further, and it seems to me that take it a step further and say, yes, you still have to be, you still can't get away with, but I'm not sure anybody can get away with being certainly aggressive with police, regardless. But yeah, I think you do want your children to not be afraid, but you also want to keep them, you want them to be safe. You are listening to Creating a Family, talk about adoption and infertility. We are so glad to have you with us on this Creating a Family show, where we have a panel of young adult transracial adoptees talking about their experience growing up as well as their experience as adults now. We primarily keep in touch with our audience through our twice-weekly e-newsletters. We let you know about the latest developments in adoption and infertility. And also we add, almost every week we add 4 and often 5 or 6 pieces of new educational content to our site, and through our newsletters how you would find out about what we've added, because it might be something of interest to you. You can sign up for our weekly newsletters on any page of our website, top right-hand side. One of the things that adoptive parents, particularly in a transracial adoption situation, that we worry about is we want our kids to have a healthy sense of their racial identity. Did you always think of yourself as fully black or African American, or were you ever confused about your racial identity? We hear some people say that they knew that the world may have seen them as black, but they felt like they were white. They were that and that was a confusing thing for them. Mariette?
That's really funny, because I kind of struggled with that when I moved down to Florida, and everyone always told me, "You talk like a white girl. Why do you sound white? Oh, you're white." So I really felt like growing up I never fit into the white world, but then I came down to South Florida, and for a long time I never felt like I fit into the black world, and so I really was like in the middle. I was completely in limbo. And I think it took me a while to really accept myself, and, this is who I am. I'm a product of my upbringing, my circumstances. I don't have to fit into anyone's box, but it was really hard for a while, being in college and people just thinking, you're not really black, you don't talk black, you don't dress like you're black, you don't listen to, quote-unquote black music. So it was difficult for a while.
What helped you? How did you... Was it just maturity that reconciled that for you, or did you actively do something that made it better for you?
No, I just realized I don't have to fit into their box, and it's like I can, listen to John Mayer and I can still be black. And like being black has nothing to do with, how you dress, how you talk, how you act. It has nothing to do with that. And it was just maturity and just going through that and realizing that I don't necessarily fit into any one box, and that's completely okay.
I love that. I can listen to John Mayer and still be black. I like that. Andrew, did you ever struggle with, am I black or am I white? How do I fit into my racial identity?
I wouldn't say that I ever kind of struggled with it. Kind of similar to what she was saying. You kind of are who you are. You don't really see anything different until other people try to put you in some sort of categorical box that you're supposed to fit in. When I was in college, I played football, and my nickname was the Suburban Bro, because I wasn't black, but I wasn't white, obviously. And like she said, it's just a maturity thing that ends up coming, that, because I speak the way I speak, it makes me, I don't even know what a black person speaks like, to be completely honest. So like she said, it's just, you get used to it and then you get over it as you get older, because most of the people who say that don't really matter anyway.
Julius, what about you?
Yeah, I had, kind of a similar experience in that, I experienced people, you don't talk, like we expected you to, or anything like that. But I always had, I guess, people didn't say it as like a negative thing, really. It was kind of just like, oh, you're a little bit different from us. That's kind of cool, actually, because, a lot of my friends had never had a black friend before because they grew up in an area where, literally everyone you see is white every day. And, also, I kind of think as of right now, especially now that I'm a little bit older, more mature, I kind of, I almost like it in a way, because I can kind of fit in with two different groups of people. On the outside, I'm accepted as a black person. Black people, they're very receptive to me, always willing to talk, everything like that. And at the same time, because I guess as people would describe it, on the inside I was white, that's something that I can use to my advantage. And, I'm not as intimidating to someone who may otherwise be intimidated by someone who's African American or something like that, just because they can't really, relate to them. But, because I grew up with white people, because, I'm college educated, everything like that, I've been able to kind of fit in with two different groups, which is kind of nice for me, that, I have two different groups of people who can accept me for different reasons.
And you never felt that that your black friends judged you because you weren't black enough?
I'll be honest with you. I think I've had probably three black friends in my entire life. Just because of where I've grown up. I don't really have any black friends.
Okay. And Mariette, when you described being not really fitting into the black social networks at school, was that because they didn't feel was your perception that they didn't feel like you were black enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny. I, grew up in Canada, and so I wanted to have, I wanted something completely opposite from what I grew up in. So I applied to a historically black college where it was literally 99% of the population on campus was black. So I immersed myself right into that. And so coming in, I was just an alien. I was, basically an outsider coming in. And so it was hard. Like, the first couple of years of college, it was really hard. And so I joined a sorority. I played volleyball. Like, I really wanted to, get, I guess, the black experience that I felt I missed out on growing up. And like I said, it was a maturity thing, finding out that this isn't necessarily what I needed. I didn't need to, go to the school and become black or whatever. And it's like I was just fine with who I was.
Okay, got it. And Andrew, did you ever feel that you didn't fit with the black circle? And I'm going to say either at high school or college, because I do think you almost have to be at that age. And I think for a lot of people, it's college where it really kind of hits. I've talked to a lot of transracial adoptees, and it's, you're under your parents' kind of umbrella when you're growing up, and people know you as your parents, even in high school for the most part, unless you go to a really large school. People know you as your parents' child. But in college, that's not the case. You are your own person. And was that an issue when you went to college, or did you go to a college that was predominantly white? And Andrew, I was actually asking you that question.
Sure. I went to a college that was kind of mixed. It was down in Maryland. But when I first got there were times and there were things that I didn't know, and part of it was kind of cultural. Part of it was, the slang that people used, but a lot of it was also just from where they were, not necessarily just because they were black.
Right.
Because some of the guys that just happened to be black were from kind of more of the deep South, like the Floridas, the Georgias, whereas I was from the Northeast. But it definitely is something that's different. I mean, it's just a cultural thing, no different than if anyone else, from a white community would go into a black community, see the different cultural differences. That's more or less what it was. And I just didn't share a lot of those similar cultural habits or tendencies that they had.
Okay, now we're going to kind of come to the advice part of the show. A lot of the people who are going to be listening to this show are either considering or have already adopted transracially. So this is your time to kind of, what we're hoping to do is make it easier for this next generation, although it doesn't sound like any of you had necessarily a particularly difficult time. So maybe I should say make it as easy for this next generation of transracial adoptees. So what advice would you give to transracial adoptive parents who are currently raising children of color? Either things that your parents did well that you wish they had done, or just things you've thought on of your own that you think would make it easier. We'll start with you, Julius.
I would just say, from time to time, just, kind of check in and see how things are going with it. My parents, kind of discussed, I think everyone's are kind of the same in this group, that they were very open with me, which helped a lot. So I knew that if I had a question, if I had a concern, if there was an issue at school, that I could talk to my parents about it. which is really helpful. I didn't necessarily take advantage of it, but at least it was there as an option. And along the same lines, I hadn't really spoke about my doctor and people like that in my life. My parents would always ask me, are you more comfortable with a person of color being your doctor, or do you want us to try to find you a tutor that's a person of color? Would that make you more comfortable? And my answer was always no, but at least I had that option in case that was an issue to me. I could have someone in a support group with my parents that they would cater to my needs and help me out if that was an issue for me.
That had become important to you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew.
As far as kind of the advice would go, I would just simply say, kind of the way it seems that everyone else's parents in here were as well, is just being open, being caring, and understand the some of the trials that you will have to go through in regards to the race barrier, some of the discomfort and some of the awkwardness at times. But I think that at the end of the day, just taking away the fact that there is race. I mean, at the end of the day, kids don't care. And when you're kind of adopted younger, at least as I was, I don't know if the same is for Julius, by the time that I was 11, 12, it wasn't even a factor anymore. And I think that, with adoption as a whole, whether it be, transracial, whatever type of adoption you tend to go, as long as you kind of love the child with your whole heart, as my mother did, they'll never be embarrassed by it. They'll never be sorry that they are part of your family. And as far as everything else, it'll just be trial and error, just like raising any other kid.
Which is a lot of raising kids, trial and error. Mariette, what about you? You're kind of in a unique position because you actually have children, so it may be easier for you to think of an advice, although I think you and your husband are both African American, or you are Haitian American, or I'm not sure you're American, you may be Haitian Canadian, but you are black in America, living in America, so your experiences might be a little different. But what advice would you give transracial parents, adoptive parents?
I think the advice given so far has been really good, and just to add to that, I just think basically don't pretend that differences don't exist. I think I have spoken to some parents who reached out to me through my blog asking advice, and they want to pretend like there's not going to be any problems, and they just want to pretend like if they love their kids enough, then there won't be any issues. And just letting them know basically that you'll have some tough times and your kid might have some tough times, and they'll be okay. They can get through it, but just don't pretend that everything's okay. And I think that one of the things when I was talking about parents just to ignore the racism, instead of having a discussion like, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. Why would someone say this to you? And let's, get to the heart of it. And then I think I would have had an easier time opening up over the years when things like that would have happened instead of just holding it in. So I think, the advice that was given before, be open, be honest, be ready, but don't pretend like there's not going to be any problems, because there will be some issues you face when you have a transracial adoption.
All right, and Mariette, were there any resources or books that you remember growing up as being helpful? Did your parents buy you brown baby dolls? Did they insist that you have a Barbie that was a Barbie of color? Although they do make them, but they're not very much of color. But anyway, did they read you books? Were there resources that you happen to remember that stuck out in your head as either being helpful or not?
Yeah, my parents, they bought us dolls. I remember having dolls that were black, and we had storybooks. One of my favorite stories was Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. I don't know if you've heard of that book.
Wait, say the name again? Wait, say the name again?
Okay. Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters is basically, it's an African folktale, and so my mom would read that book to me a lot when I was growing up. But they did a lot when I was a child. Growing up, it's a little bit harder, I think, as a 13, 14-year-old. How do you, provide books for that age group. But growing up, I did have some things to help.
Okay, and you may not have any memory of this, but was having dolls that shared your skin tone, if they did, did that make a difference, or do you think that you wouldn't have cared either way?
No, I think it did. And as an adult, I look back and I appreciate that they did that. So I think that even if I didn't understand it as a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, I think looking back, I'm like, okay, they made an effort that, at least I had some dolls to play with that looked like me.
Yeah. Andrew, any resources or books that you remember from growing up?
As far as kind of the books and everything went, there's nothing that kind of stuck out in my mind that would 100% be for people within kind of the transracial adoption book. But if people are looking for kind of, maybe a children's book that's a little bit more, kind of African-American or like an African folktale, I do always remember this one called The Baby Leopard that my mom used to read. It was about how leopards got their spots, but other than that, no, I don't remember anything 100% that would be of use.
And for our audience, we will look up these books, and if they're still in print, we will add them to our suggested books for children in transracial adoption. We have the best of the best books section of our website, and we will add all of these so you can go there and see it. Julius, how about you?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. I mean, I had, multiracial dolls. My parents bought me dolls when I was a kid and everything like that. At the time, kind of like what was said before, it didn't really register to me that there was a difference between the dolls, which in hindsight kind of just made me, in general, kind of, I guess, colorblind, and it helped with that. Just the general idea that, a black and white doll, it's still a doll, it's the same thing. So, just having that, being exposed to that, and then again, like I said about the adoption group we had, just being exposed to that and just seeing that, there's nothing wrong with a black doll. There's nothing wrong with having, white parents when you're black. And, additionally, I have, I don't think it's the case with the other two here, but I actually have 2 moms. So there was that factor as well, that, it's okay to have 2 moms. That's our family. We function just like every other family, and, it doesn't really make a difference either way.
And that was a separate issue growing up that made your family a little different, and I would imagine that they sought out role models and other families that were like yours as well in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
We have an email question that came in from Teresa. She wanted to know if she is a transracial adoptive mom, and she is worried that her daughter will grow up wishing that she was white, and she wants to know if any of you have had that experience. She does not say whether her daughter has had that experience or if she is just. It appears that she is just concerned that her daughter might. Let's see, Julius, we'll start with you.
I mean, I don't really think I've had that experience, just because I've had a very supportive network my whole life. I can kind of see, especially when you're younger, that may become an issue. I remember because I went to an all-boys middle school, and, going to school with all boys is, they're a little more rough with the teasing and everything like that. So, there are times when, I wish I would say I wish I was white in the sense that, I wish I just, like I was saying, very early in the conversation, I wish I just blended in, and no one double took me, no one's looking at me just because I'm black, just because on the outside I stick out or something like that. But other than that, I mean, my whole life I grew up pretty comfortable with who I was, and like I said, my parents were very supportive, and they always reassured me that, there's nothing wrong with me and there's nothing wrong with our family. So I've always grown up with that mentality that, if someone thinks there's an issue with me, being who I am, that's their problem, not mine.
Yeah, that's probably their issue. Andrew, any thoughts for Teresa on her concern that her daughter might grow up wishing that she were white?
I think kind of similar to what Julia said, it would more or less, I think, be one of those single solitary cases where something happens and for whatever reason things would just be easier, had she fit in, had she been white. But I think that that's a passing phase, and that's something that, her daughter might, cross through her mind at some point. But as she gets older and more mature and, those, little things that pass as you're a child that seem like the end of the world, go by, then she'll be fine, and that, won't be an issue, I believe.
And Mariette, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think boys and girls transracially adopted boys and girls have much different experiences, and I think that because our culture places so much emphasis on physical appearance and beauty with women, I had a hard experience growing up, and I think I wanted to have blonde hair and blue eyes. Like, I always wanted that growing up. And so I definitely know where this moment's coming from, because there's not a lot of representation of black women in media. And I think surrounding her with that, maybe, like cutting out pictures of magazines. I don't know how old she is, but like cutting out pictures of magazines, like making a collage of like beautiful faces of all different skin colors, and letting her know that this isn't the only thing out there, having, long hair, and beauty comes in all different shapes and it looks different. And I think that would help a lot with her daughter.
That's a great idea. And don't you think that it might make a difference now that our First Lady is a beautiful black woman, that
right.
that changes our, it's, all you got to do is turn on the TV or, open up the newspaper or a magazine and you see a strong, beautiful black woman. Would that have made it easier? And that's kind of a silly question, because how do you know, since it didn't exist until you were already in your 20s. But although you probably were in your young 20s when she was first, when her husband was first elected, did that make a difference for you as far as your idea of beauty?
Absolutely, and I think it's great because I feel like for a very long time, the only black women you saw in the media were, light-skinned with a certain type. Like, there's just a certain type of black woman. And so I appreciate
No, but
that
Oprah Winfrey, she was
right,
not.
That's right, Oprah Winfrey. But, Lupita Nyong'o, who just won the Oscar for Best Actress,
right.
Dark skin, short hair, and it's like you see that it's like all different types of black women are represented, not just one type. And so I think that we're making progress, definitely. We're making progress.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah, I agree with you. You are listening to Creating a Family. Our mission at Creating a Family is to provide unbiased, accurate information to those who are touched by adoption or infertility. We have a lot of resources on our site for transracial adoption. We also, as I mentioned, have books for children, and all of those can be found at our website, creatingafamily.org. I'd also like to thank you guys so much, Julius Johnson, Mariette Williams, and Andrew Lee, for being on our show today. I do want to take a moment to thank a few more of our gold sponsors and to remind you that it is through their generous support that we can bring you this show, as well as all the resources at Creating a Family. We have Children's Connection. They are an adoption agency with offices throughout Texas, providing domestic infant adoption, embryo donation, home studies, and post-adoption services and support. We have Hopscotch Adoptions. They are a national adoption agency with offices in North Carolina and New York, and they place children from Bulgaria, Georgia, Ghana, Armenia, Morocco, and Serbia. And we have the Independent Adoption Center. Their mission is to provide open adoption placement and counseling to birth and adoptive families. They work with families in all 50 states, but they're fully licensed in California, New York, Florida, Texas, and actually in more than that. And last but not least, the law offices of James Fletcher Thompson. They are a South Carolina firm committed to adoption and assisted reproductive law. To get more information, well, first of all, let me say that if you're interested in the topics of this show, transracial adoption, please join us, or please look up my blog tomorrow. I will be blogging on it, and you can join in the discussion tomorrow. To get more information about only one of our panelists is a blogger, but she's a darn good one. Mariette Williams' blog is those4littlewords.com, and that it ends in a plural. Words is plural. I have thoroughly enjoyed Mariette's blog. She interviews different experiences, and she and I think, are both committed to the reality that not everyone's adoption experience is identical. Not all adoptees are the same, and she's taken a different approach in showing that by featuring interviews with adoptees, and not just adoptees, but adopted parents, everybody. And I've just loved Mariette. I've loved your blog, and I recommend everyone go out there and read it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
The Starlight Lounge presents An Evening with the Progressive Box.
Old moon, yeah. That's Hugo, tickling the ivories. He just saved by bundling home and auto with Progressive. Gonna finally buy a ring for that gal of yours, Hugo? Send her my condolences. Hi-oh! This next one's for you two. There's a burglar in my heart. Thank you.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discounts not available in all states or situations.